welcome to episode 5 of the 240p Club. Today we're going to talk about extinct game genres. We'll put it this way, they're not quite extinct because the indie gaming scene is still making replicas, but as far as the big companies remaking some of these games, it's probably not going to happen. The first thing we talked about would be platform gaming. We talked about that in the past episode, and that's still around basically. But it's more like a retro style than it is like a necessity, because people aren't making platform games and showcasing them as the top, they're top of the line. So, just want to introduce everyone again.
Yo. Hi, I'm Nikki. Nice to meet you all again.
I'm Ray. Hi.
And we got a special guest panelist here, actually.
I am Cornelio.
No, he's not.
He's not.
No,
He's
I'm
not.
actually John.
Yeah, this is John. He's going to be guesting with us for episode 5 tonight. John, what systems do you have?
Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis,
Yeah. and
and many others.
many others. Nice. What is your favorite game of all time, man?
As far as the beat 'em up genre, I know Maximum Carnage is one of them. Final
Nice.
Fights, Streets of Rage,
Oh, yeah. All
Ninja Turtles
awesome,
games.
all awesome games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, letting a lot of quarters into the Teenage Ninja Turtles arcade game. I remember that clearly. Anyway, we'll talk about like some extinct genres. Obviously, we just mentioned platform gaming, but what Fallon just mentioned was the beat 'em ups, as you
The
know.
games that, also known as the games that really don't exist anymore. Well, technically, it's not that they don't exist anymore. They've since evolved into another genre, which we'll get into pretty soon.
Yeah, basically, it's one guy against like a whole army. You just see like things coming at you, and you fight them like barefoot. Sometimes you have weapons. Sometimes you'll have guns with like a couple different shots, as in some of the old games. But mostly, like, just think Final Fight and Streets of Rage and all those games.
Yeah, those games have since evolved into the 1 versus 1,000 Dynasty Warriors style, which, as I've mentioned in a few podcasts, I am quite a fan of those series, but, I also would like to see a return of the beat 'em up.
I mean, some indie designers are still designing games like that, but that was the thing with the hardware, the way it was, the NES and the Super NES era, that, and even the arcades too, 3D gaming was still in the experimental phase, so they weren't having like games with these 3D worlds, or if they were very limited. So 2D beat 'em ups were a popular genre that got away from the standard platforming run and jump game.
There was even a Sailor Moon beat 'em up.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Yeah, on the Super Famicom,
Yes.
which was never released here, of course, because Sailor Moon didn't pop up until the Super NES was like on its last legs here.
It was a really cool game, though. Like, you know how with every beat 'em up you had the one button that they could do special attacks with? Well, the Sailor Moon game had that as well, where you would have Sailor Mercury would do the bubbles attack. Sailor Mars would send out her crows if you press the special button. I think Sailor Venus would like hit you with her whip, and Sailor Jupiter would just kind of like kick you right in the face, something like that. But
Interesting.
yeah, it was pretty cool. I believe John and I have tried it once, that game, and we put many quarters in, and I don't know if we ever beat it, but
I just remember the arcades playing the Ninja Turtles arcade game. That was one that ate many of my quarters over the years. The
There were
X-Men.
2 of them, actually.
Yeah, Turtles
the
at
giant
time as well.
X-Men.
Yeah, X-Men, that ate a lot of quarters. This was like right around the time the fighting games started coming out. Like Street Fighter 2 came out, and then Mortal Kombat, and then bam, like the arcades got a lot of fighting games, and that got most of the quarters. But there's nothing wrong with going in and playing a good old-fashioned beat 'em up.
Any thoughts on Die Hard Arcade?
I don't remember Die Hard Arcade, to be honest with you.
I believe it was one of the first 3D beat 'em ups.
Yeah, it was more 3D based. With the polygonal graphics.
I think it got ported to the PS1 as Die Hard Trilogy.
No, it was ported to the Sega Saturn as Die Hard Arcade. Die Hard Trilogy was a different type of game.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all fun games. I know, Rockstar tried to somewhat bring it back with the Warriors game on PS2, which actually featured a arcade machine after you beat it as one of the unlockables, where you can play basically a parody of Double Dragon, only featuring the Warriors characters. beating up some of the gangs from the movie. But yeah, no, it was 3D. I mean, it kind of went the way a bit of God of War, a bit like with the 3D, realms and everything. But there were certain parts where they were just straight up beat 'em ups.
One of the last 3D beat 'em ups was on the PS2. It was actually part of the Final Fight franchise. It's called Final Fight Streetwise. And it really wasn't all that popular. The fans of Final Fight, I'm sure they were happy to see Cody back because Cody hasn't been in Final Fight since the first one. But I think they were disappointed to see that he was actually not the protagonist, not the character they could play as. Rather than it was his lesser-known younger brother. People were like, well, who the hell is this character? And also, the game more or less was
They introduced him, though. That's the thing. They explained why that made sense.
Right, they did because Cody had arthritis and everything. But it really was just a Fight Club parody. Really. I mean, it was a good game, don't get me wrong. The reviews for it are really crappy, but I think everyone, should go get their own opinion on
Granted,
it.
a lot of people that played it, reviewed it, supposedly didn't play it much. That's my understanding.
Right. I mean, yeah, it was actually a pretty decent game. But,
Well, it was it was PS2 classics.
Yeah. Well, not entirely a classic.
It was a late entry.
Yeah, it was a late entry. Because I think at that point Opeth had just put out Ghost Reveries, I think, because one of their songs was also featured in the game, so...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
metal in the game.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Was it Roadrunner Records?
Roadrunner Records.
But yeah, Roadrunner had a
Sounds like the game,
soundtrack to
pretty
that.
much.
So I could beat up people while listening to Opeth. It's cool.
There's also there's
events.
to change the topic just a bit. There's also a shoot 'em ups were another genre that has gone the way of the dinosaur. Thinking shoot 'em ups, thinking 1943. Like if you ever played that game, the one plane against the bunch of different planes. Gradius was a classic example. The TurboGrafx CD system had a insane amount of shoot 'em ups. You had the Neo Geo, which is known for arcade Street Fighter clones, and TurboGrafx 16, the Turbo Duo, PC Engine, whatever you call that system, they were known mainly for their shooters and Splatterhouse.
Wasn't one of the Splatterhouses considered a beat 'em up as well?
Yeah, actually, they were all considered beat 'em ups. Splatterhouse is just like a horror themed beat 'em up. One guy in a mask with weapons facing all these supernatural horrors. It's basically an homage to Friday the 13th, only except you were playing the killer this time. It was pretty cool. Especially the I played the first one on the TurboGrafx. That was amazing. But otherwise, they were known mainly for shooters like Gate of Thunder, Lords of Thunder, Airzone, Cosmic Fantasy, I believe was. No, that was a RPG. They had bunch of shooters. I believe the last one I've ever seen appear was called Darius Grade, and it was one of the launch titles for the Sega Saturn. And it was basically a souped-up version of a shooter. It was back when the genre was just basically exiting the mainstream. I'm trying to think of some of them. Obviously, the most popular one's the Gradius series. Gradius Light Force, Gradius 2, which was released in Japan.
Squaresoft threw their hat in the ring with Einhander, which was a PS1 game released in '98 or something.
Oh wow, that was a shooter?
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, I do also remember on the Super Nintendo there was a game called Pilot Wings, and it was, you go through four different instructors, because once you beat the three, you got to another guy. It was basically, they teach you how to skydive, how to fly a plane, etc., etc. But as soon as you were done all four of the instructors, somehow the entire game changed from you're just this random little avatar who tries to learn how to skydive and all that, to this huge story to where the three instructors were kidnapped by some Soviet soldiers, and you were thrown into a plane, which is kind of going into what we're talking about, the shoot 'em ups and everything.
Well,
you were thrown into a helicopter, and you had to bomb bases, and you had to rescue the three.
In Soviet Russia, Pilot Wings play you.
It was the weirdest thing. I had never seen a game at this point go from so lighthearted to something so completely out of left field.
If anyone didn't know, this is a launch title for the Super NES. Is that Pilot Wings? I think F-Zero was another one. Super Castlevania, like all these games came out at the same time as the system. And Pilot Wings is funny because of the frustration level.
Oh, I absolutely suck at this game.
Over 9,000.
I'll be
That describes it.
Yeah, I'll be on
The Twitch page.
the runway and like trying to figure out how to fly the plane, because when I'm already in the air I'm thinking, okay, well, there's a big chance I'm gonna crash, but I'm supposed to get to the runway and that's it. The second scenario the second instructor had where you were on the runway and you had to fly up. Well, I pressed the wrong button and ended up in the water more times than none.
We will put together the best video outtakes of Nikki trying to play this game on our Twitch.
It is going to be glorious.
Yes. We will have many takes, outtakes, and all that wonderful stuff. That will appear on our Twitch fairly soon.
Some of it will not involve me cursing, and some of it might. Well, I mean, it's not really me getting frustrated playing it. It's more so just me going, did I? Yeah, I'm like, did I crash again? Did I crash? What happened? And it's also me screaming at heights because I don't like heights. And me screaming about, like, throwing the plane 900 feet in the air and, like, trying to figure out where in God's name I am.
Seems like more of a simulation than it is a shoot 'em up.
Well, it is a
like a
simulation, but at the very end they come up with that, like, shoot 'em up scenario.
Oh yeah.
Which is, like I said, completely out of left field. It's like suddenly they're kidnapped by these, like,
Soviets.
extreme Soviet. I think they were Soviets.
KGBs.
I don't remember. It's because I really suck at the game. I'm probably not going to get to that scenario, or we'll get there
We'll
eventually.
play around with a Game
Yeah.
Genie or something.
Yeah, something like that. But it's just the weirdest.
Yeah. You know what? Believe it or not, I don't think I've ever played Pilot Wings. I know all about it, but I don't think I've ever played it.
They did like a whole bunch of other ones for like 3DS, for like the Nintendo 64, but they were just like playing with the Nintendo avatars and just having like some kind of paradise world where you can hang glide and all that. And
Wow.
yeah, it was nothing like the SNES versions.
Oh yeah, the frustration level.
Ugh. Oh yes.
Well, another extinct genre is text-based games, of all things. These were in early PC systems. They had trouble processing a whole lot of graphics, so you could actually design an RPG on just with text, and basically you type text commands as to where you want to go. A lot of times, like these evolved eventually into something called MUDs, which were multi-user dungeons, which was the distant ancestor of the MMORPG.
I believe now they're
I played EverQuest for years, and it's basically like a MUD with a user interface. At least it was before all these expansions came out.
I believe now Telltale Games have picked up this genre and started with their own little franchises. Like, I think they did one for Minecraft. I think they are doing one for Batman, and they did one for The Walking Dead. Not text-based, but some of it does have some text where it's like you choose who gets to live or die.
You'll like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's not exactly text-based. It's not exactly MUDs, but it seems like they kind of picked it up and put their own little spin on it.
Yeah, these are. I think Wizardry is probably one of the best examples of this series. That was old series of computer games. This was basically there were no graphics. Sometimes, eventually graphics kind of snuck in. They were just like pictures of like where you were, or like a certain scenario, like a stock footage would pop up if you died. Basically, it's just typing, and mapping was very important because you wanted to know exactly what direction you were going. Fights happen, you type in attack, it'll basically just keep attacking. Eventually, they got a little sophisticated, added auto mapping features and stuff like that, but for the most part, these were all just text-based games. They not exactly, I guess, related, but not exactly the same genre. Where the These are also exclusively to PC. A few made their way to Nintendo, but exclusively PC. You know, the pick your commands type games, like adventure games. Like basically, you know, you have to make sentences for the characters to do, and it would feature like on the bottom screen a menu with like verbs and like, you know, it's like go to. Then you click on somewhere on the screen, like using your mouse, or in the NES using the NES controller.
You're talking about point and click adventures.
Point and click adventures. Thank you for giving me a name to what we were talking about.
Also have made a comeback as of late, even though they're kind of starting to become considered shovelware, I think, because of one certain developer, Telltale. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just as I mentioned earlier with the Telltale games.
But like King Quest, one of the like earlier adventure games, has made a comeback recently.
Actually, the one game I'm thinking that used that successfully, Maniac Mansion.
I believe there was a Chrono Trigger game similar to that.
Yeah, there was one based off of Chrono Trigger in Japan called Radical Dreamers, which I think was another Satellaview game. I brought that up last week.
Thank you. Yes, I was trying to remember the name of it.
And that eventually evolved into Chrono Cross for PS1, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah, Chrono Cross.
Bring back Crimson Echoes!
Yeah, Chrono Cross for some reason I don't think mud or, you know, text-based when I see that. Or point and click.
No.
But yeah, no, Maniac Mansion is probably one of the most popular ones of that genre, and yeah, obviously, like you said, King's Quest. Also, Monkey Island, that is a really fun one. I think that was considered one of the best. These also made their way to the Nintendo, like Maniac Mansion was on Nintendo, but it was so complicated using a controller where you should have a mouse. Then it made it really difficult.
Back to shoot 'em ups for a second. Would the Silver Surfer game on NES be considered a shoot 'em up?
Yes, it would. That's
everywhere you go. You die.
That game.
Everywhere you go, you die.
Yep. You know, there will be no Twitch playthrough of that. That's just too frustrating. That game was like it was legendary. How hard it was, even as a kid, and to this day, like you could probably see someone online if you search YouTube beating it, but.
The AVG
not like
did a whole thing about it.
Oh yeah, he did. He used the Game Genie, I think, after a while just to get some of the screenshots, but otherwise, yeah, it's possible.
I believe there was another game on the Super Nintendo that was kind of shoot 'em up, more or less like a rail shooter. Was Hyperzone. I don't believe the game really got all that popular, and to be honest, I have never heard of it until I got it for my birthday, like years and years ago. But I recently played it again, and it was actually pretty decent. You're in a little spaceship, and you're going through the level, and you're just kind of shooting at monsters and enemies that are coming after you. It's a pretty cool game. I have mentioned that maybe perhaps we could Twitch it sometime. If we have time.
We probably will. Mm-hmm. My favorite shooter of all time, like if we're going back to shooters, Lords of Thunder. That game was just ridiculous. It was a CD for TurboGrafx CD, aka the PC Engine. It was phenomenal. Just really hard though, especially like even on the normal difficulty, it was hard. Basically, you got to pick your suit. They may put some RPG elements into it, like you enter a shop before you go out there, and you could get like coins and stuff, like to use as credits once you hit the stages. But yeah, basically it was just you had to collect crystals to power up. And every time you got hit, your weapon deteriorated. Basically, instead of a ship, you were a guy flying around in armor. Anything got close to you, you swing a sword at them, but at the meantime, you were just shooting like projectiles as well. Depending on what suit of armor you picked, the projectiles would go in different patterns. It came out in '93, I think, like early '93, and that was probably like the pinnacle of the shoot 'em up, like around that time. It's so much fun.
I believe then shoot 'em up started evolving. There was one game that I remember I had for the Super Nintendo was Lethal Enforcers, where you had to plug in the...
That was more like... I guess you consider that one a first-person shooter.
Yeah, it started to evolve more into first-person shooter.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, around the PlayStation era, they decided to evolve this genre, and we got a game called Descent, which, you could fly the ship in 360, but that was more like a first-person shooter than a...
And that's where, like, the original Resident Evils came in. Not the Resident Evils, I'm sorry, the House of the Dead.
Yeah, they basically evolved.
Time Crisis is another one.
Yeah,
which
Time
is
Crisis
really
was in the
innovative because
arcades,
it had had the pedal and everything, and
yeah, you get to duck behind things, like, you know, hit the pedal, shoot,
The
duck behind.
distortion pedal.
There you go.
and if you had to reload, you take your gun off screen, pull the
Fire
trigger,
off
and then
screen,
yeah.
like, to reload. Yeah, it was a good system.
Many quarters went in that.
We also had Sunset Riders too. That was
Yeah.
another one.
Area 51, anyone?
Yeah, Area 51.
Yeah, I did play Area 51. Yes,
You'll find that
That was
at
a
like
big arcade.
every single arcade game, or every
arcade you walk
arcade
into
you will
still
find
has
at
games.
least
Yeah.
in Area
I
51.
haven't seen that since the 90s, I don't think.
Well, you see something like that, like Time Crisis will be in there. Yeah, that's what the shoot 'em up genre you evolved into. Like once 3D gaming and especially like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D got big, then companies started focusing on shooters, making shooters better, like first person shooters, and then the shooters, like the classic shooters, became first person shooters. Like instead of having a gun, like a guy walking around with a gun, had someone piloting a ship, basically doing the same thing. So yeah,
I'm not good at first-person shooters, and they also give me extreme headaches.
I suck at them. Like I was good at the original Doom back in the day. Actually, Quake 2 is my shit. Like I used to play Quake 2 deathmatches like constantly. Like that was my late '90s fix right there. Otherwise, like I just kind of got out of the genre because now you have like your Call of Duties and everything, and
Duke Nukem 64.
I never played Duke Nukem 64. I played 3D for the PC. That was awesome.
I will say Half-Life 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. If you haven't played that, who here listening to this hasn't played that? Like, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Bioshock is another one.
Yeah, these are all the genres people still developing active games for, especially like the Call of Duty series. That's really big.
I think there's never going to be like, well, in the next 10 years or so, next maybe 5-10 years, a year where there will not be a Call of Duty game that comes out, even if it's just a remake, even if it's like
expansion set.
expansions, new DLC, or if it's a remake of like Call of Duty 1 or something.
It's
Like
called,
a remaster.
Yeah, the first person shooter has gone many ways. Like it went medieval with Hexen, and then like once Hexen was a PC game. It got pretty big, but not that big.
It was a 64 version of it.
Yeah, they made it Hexen 64, and they also made it for PlayStation. And then it wound up eventually developing the Elder Scrolls series, which is like first person. And then, obviously Skyrim was like their grand achievement for that one. But yeah, the shooter genre kind of completely just melted away and then turned into the shoot 'em up genre. Like
So you mean
turned
the other
into
way around?
Yes, I do.
He means it the other way around, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Thank you guys for the support. We have a couple different pages up. We have a constantly active Twitch account. We're playing the best of like 8 and 16-bit games. We do post in our Facebook.com/240p Club about when our when our Twitch is going live. And we also have twitch.tv/240p Club. And we also have a blog, which is 240pclub.com. It's also, if you don't have iTunes, where you can listen to the latest podcast. We have an exciting project coming up for episodes 6 and 7. It's a 2-part podcast. We're going to be talking all about RPGs. We're going to do 2 top 5 lists, actually. We're going to just be talking about RPGs in general, and then we're going to do, for another part, 2 top 5 lists. The first top 5 list is Final Fantasy games. We tried to break it up because we didn't want to do a top 10 and have the entire top rounded out in Final Fantasy games, so we separated the Final Fantasy games from all the other RPGs for you guys. And then, we're going to vote eventually on our top favorites, and you guys could vote on your top favorites as well.
We will probably be putting up a poll on our Facebook page once I learn how to configure that.
Oh, that's easy. I'll figure that one out.
Oh yeah, then we'll have a nice little contest.
we'll
Well, not
just-
contest, but
Yeah, well, we will be debating as well our selections.
don't
We
say
all-
13.
Final Fantasy 13 is the greatest RPG of all time.
Don't make me come over there.
Help.
It really is, though.
That's 13 too.
13-3.
Lightning Returns.
Really?
Like I said, I think the entire reason that exists was people could cosplay and fuck that game. I'm just gonna say
It's a dress-up doll game for fetishists.
basically, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't play it enough. The only FF13 experience I ever had is from the Final Fantasy Record Keeper game on mobile.
I did go through Final Fantasy 13, and I think maybe like an hour into the game I realized what in God's name is going on. I had no idea who this character was, who that character was, and usually I like to engage who these characters are, where I'm at, the environment I'm in. But just, despite the fact that 13 was so linear, and that's one thing that people were really annoyed about, it's just, I still had absolutely no idea what was going on.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't be. Yeah, it would be FF13 free. Sorry.
Yeah. If you do like that series, cool. We're not knocking on you. It's just, we're knocking on the game, so.
Thanks for listening to us today. If you want more information on the 240p Club, you want to go to our website, 240pclub.com. Also, we have facebook.com/240p Club, and we're also on twitch.tv under 240p Club.